Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. Heshen, a prominent figure during the Qianlong reign of the Qing Dynasty, lived a life full of opportunities and dramatic twists. He rose from an obscure minor official all the way up to becoming a powerful minister who held sway over the entire court, truly a darling of fate. However, as the saying goes, what goes around comes around. After the death of Emperor Qianlong, and once Emperor Jiaqing took control of real power, Heshen's springtime came to an abrupt end. No longer shielded by the late emperor's favor, Heshen was stripped of his authority and pushed to a dead end, ultimately becoming a notorious cautionary tale in Chinese history, ending his life through imperial decree to commit suicide. It's worth noting that, since Heshen was one of Qianlong's most favored ministers in his later years, Emperor Jiaqing didn't act rashly when handling his case. Instead, he first had a private conversation with him. From this dialogue, it's not hard to see Heshen did not believe himself to be the greatest corrupt official in Qing history. In his eyes, the real corrupt heavyweight was someone else entirely. So, who exactly was this true grand corrupt official that Heshen referred to? To answer that, we need to look back at the complex power struggles within the imperial court at the time. In fact, in that bureaucratic world full of superficiality and hidden currents, those who truly wielded power often operated behind the scenes. They stayed silent, never flaunted themselves, yet could easily tip the balance of power. Thus, while Heshen's downfall certainly sent shockwaves throughout the empire, he was ultimately just a visible pawn within a broader system of corruption. What truly drained the Qing dynasty's vitality wasn't Heshen alone, but an entire mechanism built on power abuse and mutual protection among officials. According to historical records, when Heshen was just starting out, no one could have imagined that he'd one day make such a name for himself. The only thing he had going for him early on was being a Manchu bannerman. But the problem was, Manchu sons of noble families were everywhere, as common as pebbles on the street. And there was nothing about Heshen that made him stand out as a future success. However, the young Heshen had one shining quality: he was exceptionally studious. Unlike other noble youths who spent their days wandering the streets with birdcages in hand, indulging in idle pleasures, Heshen buried himself in books, never letting a scroll leave his hand, a truly diligent learner. Not only did he read a lot, but he also had an impressive breadth of knowledge. He was particularly talented in languages, and also proficient in many of the traditional skills of the bannerman class. A genuine all-rounder. And yet, despite all this talent, young Heshen was often bullied. Children from powerful families, relying on their father's court positions, would single him out, constantly provoking, mocking, and suppressing him. Faced with such humiliation, Heshen held back his resentment. He secretly vowed, "One day, I will rise to the top, and make all those who look down on him see him in a new light." He would become a high-ranking official, and reach the most powerful position possible. Later, a stroke of luck came his way. At that time, the emperor happened to be selecting palace guards, and Heshen was chosen for his outstanding talents, giving him his first step into the imperial palace. Of course, the position of palace guard wasn't exactly prestigious. There were many guards, few of them held any real power. And to be blunt, it was mostly a marginal role. But the most valuable aspect of this post was, it allowed proximity to the emperor. For any young man, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to defy the odds. And Heshen? He wasn't just smart, he was remarkably adept at navigating social situations. He seized every opportunity to appear before Emperor Qianlong, quickly becoming a familiar face at court. One day, while the emperor was leisurely strolling in the imperial garden, he spotted some flowers in bloom. Inspired, he spontaneously recited the first half of a poem. But when he tried to follow with the second line, he just couldn't remember it. At that very moment, a soft voice from the palace guard unit picked up the verse and completed it perfectly. Qianlong's ears perked up. He turned at once and asked, "Who just said that?" A handsome young imperial guard stepped forward, knelt down, and kowtowed, speaking cautiously, "Your humble servant deserves death for disturbing your majesty's refined mood." The Qianlong emperor was quite amused and chuckled, saying, "Interesting. Tell me, what is your name?" The guard dared not raise his head and stammered, "Your servant, of the Neohuru clan, named Heshen." Qianlong nodded and said, "That name doesn't sound bad at all. And so, sometimes opportunities strike without warning, suddenly landing right on your head before you even have time to react. Had it not been for that chance encounter, or if Heshen hadn't studied hard enough to respond with the correct poetic line, he might have missed the turning point of his entire fate. This proves that when opportunity comes, one must have true ability. Otherwise, even if it stands right in front of you, you won't be able to grasp it." From that moment on, Heshen soared like a shooting star, rising step by step, officially embarking on his own golden era. Very soon, Heshen became one of the Qianlong emperor's most favored attendants. But he didn't let it get to his head. At the beginning, Heshen behaved with integrity. He acted by the book and conducted himself with restraint. He remained clean and upright. And many people believed this young man had limitless potential and was destined for greatness. In those early days, Heshen's worldview was still quite limited. His vision narrow, and there were many things he failed to see clearly. It wasn't until a major setback hit him hard that he finally recognized the harsh reality. At the time, he was committed to honesty and refused to get involved in any kind of corruption. As a result, he was secretly ostracized and sabotaged by others. He couldn't even get the smallest advantage. This blow left him disheartened and led him to a bitter realization. In the bureaucratic environment of that feudal society, wanting to serve as a clean official was nothing short of a fantasy. From then on, Heshen slowly began down a path of no return. The first time he accepted a bribe. As he stared at piles of glittering gold and silver before him, a sudden clarity seemed to dawn upon him. So this is the power of holding authority, it brings unimaginable benefits. Heshen was clever in how he operated. Using his influence, he managed to rescue a criminal who should have been sentenced to death. And in the process, he secured a substantial sum of money. To show that he was still serving the country, he handed over the majority of the silver to the national treasury. When Qianlong saw that this young man could get things done, understood the rules, and knew how to show loyalty, he was delighted and decided to promote him even further. As a result, Heshen not only rose in rank but also got a taste of the sweet rewards of both wealth and power. He also came to understand the Qianlong emperor's temperament. Though the emperor held supreme power, at heart, he was just another man who loved extravagance and saving face. From that point on, Heshen began amassing wealth across the entire country. A large portion of the silver he acquired was actually used to fund Qianlong's many grandiose projects. Qianlong loved making a grand spectacle of everything. And Heshen's money came in handy, thus the two became a perfect match. According to historians, although Qianlong was the emperor, he couldn't always act on personal will, he still had to follow procedures and protocols. This meant he needed a capable and obedient subordinate to handle the dirty work. And Heshen was exactly that. He understood the emperor's mind and could skillfully manage financial matters. Behind the scenes, he regularly sent silver to Qianlong, keeping the court looking orderly and harmonious on the surface. A facade of peace and prosperity. But in reality, the common people were suffering bitterly. Resentment ran deep across the land. Yet no one dared to speak out. The Qianlong emperor had a particular fondness for touring the Jiangnan region, indulging in the scenic mountains and rivers. Each time he embarked on a southern inspection tour, the local people would suffer terribly. Not only did they have to prepare elaborate welcomes for the imperial entourage, but they also had to spend enormous amounts of money on extravagant displays, leaving the population anxious and unsettled. But who dared to complain? They had no choice but to swallow their grievances in silence. And so the years passed. Even in his old age, Qianlong lived a life of luxury and showed no sign of restraint. But trouble was brewing. His successor, the Jiaqing emperor, was not the kind to tolerate unchecked indulgence from his officials. As soon as Emperor Jiaqing ascended the throne, he found the national treasury depleted and the people suffering. He decided that a harsh cleanup of the administration was necessary. He identified corrupt officials as the root of the empire's problems, and naturally, Heshen became his prime target. After Qianlong's death, Heshen lost his powerful patron. His estate was confiscated, and he was thrown into prison. Emperor Jiaqing personally interrogated him and spoke with brutal frankness. Heshen no longer tried to hide anything. With a bitter smile, he admitted, "It's true. This servant did embezzle quite a bit of money. But most of it was handed over to the late emperor." This statement left Jiaqing momentarily speechless. For he knew full well what kind of man his father had been. Still, the Jiaqing emperor had to take a stand. Someone had to be held accountable for the mountains of corruption and mismanagement. In the end, Heshen became the scapegoat. A classic example of how, the higher you climb, the harder you fall, in the Qing Dynasty's ruthless power game. Thus, Heshen's story stands as a mirror reflecting the absurdities and harsh realities of that era. His rise and fall force us to confront the complex interplay between power, systems, and human nature. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.